In this video, we chat with James World and Andrew Withers of Imburse Payments. They're a Zuplo customer, and they're going to tell us why they chose Zuplo over Azure API Management and all the other gateways they looked at, despite being an Azure customer. In case you don't know, Zuplo is redefining the API gateway, reinventing API management. I founded Azure API Management at Microsoft and went on to create Zuplo, which offers a fresh take on how an API gateway should work. We talk about a lot of the differentiators that we built into the product, including the programmability, the ease of deployment, and creating many environments in under 20 seconds and at low cost. So check it out. Let's go meet James and Andrew. Welcome, James. Welcome, Andrew. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, including your favorite programming language.
Yeah, hi, James World. I'm the system architect at Imburse, so overall responsibility for much of the technical design of the platform. Favorite programming language? We're predominantly a .NET platform, so it probably surprised my CTO to hear that I'm a big fan of Clojure in free time. Spend a lot of time on that. It's quite a fun functional programming language.
Nice. Andrew?
Hi, Andrew Withers, SRE at Imburse. I spend a good amount of my time working on the back-end systems as well as observability, trying to keep monitoring how our applications are performing. I've also got a long-term interest in APIs, API design, so that's something I've been able to work with recently. In terms of my favorite programming language, I'm going to have to be boring and say C#. I've been working with it pretty much since the beginning of .NET, and I have to say it's a nice, clean language that doesn't carry a lot of the baggage that some of the older languages have. So that would be mine.
Love it. A good one. I've written a lot of C# over the years. Never written any Clojure. So that's what I'm going to have to find time to have a play with. Rust is the one I most want to play with, but my favorite language, everyone knows, is JavaScript. I mean, it just works everywhere, right? So I do love it a bit. And it's also what we use in Zuplo. That's not the reason I pick it, to be clear. So tell us a little bit about Imburse Payments for the audience. What does Imburse Payments do at a high level?
So Imburse Payments is payments middleware. Now, if you want to make payments online, you'll think of things like sort of Stripe and PayPal, that kind of thing. But for a lot of larger customers that maybe operate in lots of different geographies, different time zones, they will often have many payment service providers that they work with, and they'll all work in slightly different ways. Sometimes you'll even have multiple payment service providers within the same country. Perhaps for a certain type of transaction, one is cheaper or faster than the other, or perhaps you just want some resiliency. But when you're faced with lots of different payment service providers, you're faced with the challenge of integrating with them. So what Imburse Payments is trying to do is just simplify that problem by presenting a common abstraction. So we handle the differences and the nuances of all the different payment service providers, and you talk to us through our API, and we do that translation for you. And then on top of that, we provide a number of services, reporting services, and so on, to give you that common abstraction to access your payments information.
Got it. And usually at this stage, I'd ask, what do you have an API for? But it sounds like you're kind of all API all the time, really. Then, like this is an API first business. Is that true?
That's absolutely the case. We have some UI for dashboarding and configuration and that kind of thing, but most of the time, people are talking to us through our APIs.
And you mentioned you're a .NET shop, I think, and you said despite picking Clojure, tell us a little bit about the stack and where you're hosted. I'm going to take a guess at Azure if you're a .NET shop.
Yeah. Since starting out as a startup, the initial teams in the company very much came from a Microsoft background. So Azure was a very natural choice, and we haven't seen a reason to change that. So yeah, everything is pretty much built on top of Azure. We use a lot of Kubernetes. We use a lot of sort of open source tech, but it's primarily Azure and a lot of .NET.
Got it. Awesome. So microservices in the background, would you describe it as, or?
It's a pretty modern sort of cloud-native architecture running on a containerized platform.
Perfect. So at some point we got connected around the topic of an API gateway. Tell us a little bit about the sort of, the challenge you were facing that made you start to look at options with respect to a gateway for your API.
Yeah. So, as we said, we we have a sort of a modern microservice-based architecture, and that obviously means that we need some way to coordinate requests into the microservices. We had been using a fairly sort of common but low-level approach within Kubernetes to direct calls. We very much needed to up our game and provide some features like some sort of throttling as we're sort of growing, getting more customers, a cleaner approach to security. It's also always been really important to us that we have a great developer experience, and that means having a good product life cycle around the development of your APIs, great documentation. We need to be really on it to make sure that we're having a good backwards compatibility story. It's really clear how our product should be used. But also we want to make sure that we're very agile. We're able to make changes very quickly. And so we've always taken the approach of having a really good automated deployment pipeline all the way through from that first push all the way through to automated testing and getting stuff into production. And our goal is that we are able to get changes into production ideally within minutes. Just gives us maximum flexibility, maximum responsiveness. So if a tool can't support that goal, then we don't like it.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like sort of that deployment CI/CD story is one of your key things. Well, obviously we won't bury the lead here. You folks are live on Zuplo as we speak. Your production traffic is going through our gateway. Let's talk a little bit about why you made that decision. And Andrew, I think you did actually most of the work of actually sort of deploying onto Zuplo and setting everything up, so we can get some of the details from you. But yeah, let's go through some of those things. So let's talk about the deployment CI/CD story. That sounded like it was very important to you, and why Zuplo was a winner there, how it compared against other solutions, etc.
Yeah, so very important for us to sort of try and follow a GitOps approach to deployment. We follow that for all our other sort of applications, and we looked at some alternative products, including Microsoft's API Management Gateway, for example. We tried to use that, not really because we had to, but because we just wanted to sort of keep everything Microsoft if we could. What we actually found in practice, though, was that was proving far more challenging than it needed to be. It just doesn't really have a model that lends itself well to the GitOps kind of approach to having your infrastructure defined in code. There's a lot of sort of side effects that are created when you're doing your deployments, as a lot of people would have found if they've ever tried to use it. And we were just struggling. So when we saw how Zuplo worked and just how clean it would be to use, it was a bit of a blessing. So very happy to say we went there.
Nice. And so with that, you're talking about the fact that you've been able to easily integrate into your CI/CD pipeline, get a new environment up in sort of under 20 seconds typically is how quickly it takes. And you folks have a number of environments, from staging and sandboxes and QA, and then obviously production, which you're all managing the same way. Now, obviously, Zuplo deploys by default to Cloudflare and not Azure. How did you folks find that? Does that work well for you?
Yeah, it was important for us to have a sort of single source of truth. That was the most important thing. So what we actually did is we split our pipeline so that we would deploy our sort of supporting infrastructure ahead of time before then deploying the Zuplo, the actual routes, the route definitions, so that we could do that all in one single pipeline and have everything deployed out and kept in sync.
Running in Cloudflare I think Cloudflare is a great platform. We've got past experience of it. It works really well for us, and it was certainly inspired confidence in Zuplo that you had made that choice as well. We leveraged the secure tunnels, so we tunnel straight from Cloudflare into Azure. That actually solved some problems with not sort of exposing things at the edge of our infrastructure, which was very nice. And it gives us that extra degree of resiliency and options as well. If we want to deploy infrastructure in future that doesn't sit within Azure, then we're not going to be constrained by Zuplo because of that. Yeah,
exactly. Actually, quite a few of our customers are multi-cloud today, running on Azure, AWS, and GCP and like Zuplo for that sort of same. And then they've started to add bare metal running on Equinix, I think it's called, as another option. And the fact that we're edge based is a big advantage there.
I mean, we run in a small number of data centers, leveraging the region pairing in Azure for resiliency. But obviously, with Cloudflare operating at the edge, there are many more points of ingress that can give a better experience for our customers as well with Cloudflare.
100%. Andrew, I know we spent some time chatting on Discord and so on about some of the custom code you built in Zuplo. So that's something I'd love to explore and find out more about. What some of the things you did there, how you found that experience.
Yeah, so I sort of mentioned earlier that I'm a fan of C#. It kind of really surprised me to see the TypeScript support that comes with Zuplo, and I was able to very, very quickly. I mean, I'm not a proficient TypeScript writer, but I was able to very, very quickly, I think, knock together some of our early prototypes and actually have sort of rate limiting policies written in literally minutes, and very quickly we went from there and evolved that into a whole bunch of reusable code modules, sort of having IntelliSense sort of support to help document those modules that we were writing, those reusable components. And yeah, it was just an absolute breath of fresh air compared to working with sort of XML, which is the model that we were looking at when we were looking at Microsoft APIM. Yeah, a world away from that. So yeah,
awesome,
it's really good.
And if I recall correctly, you folks built a sort of custom policy that wrapped some of our other built-in policies, because you have like a lot of authentication options you support, right? I think is there 4 types of JOT tokens? Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually more due to sort of legacy reasons. We have a number of different sort of auth flows that our platform still supports, and we needed something that would allow us to continue working with those ideally, without sort of having to rewrite everything. And yeah, really happy to see that we were able to kind of get around that problem in not much code at all. Actually, we were able to sort of write our own wrapper, as you say, around the JOT validation, and actually have one single outer policy that was able to validate all those different auth flows.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I mean, being obviously a payments platform, security is extremely important to us. And whilst a number of platforms work on the API key basis, one of the things that we discovered works well and resonates with our customers is using protocol like HMAC, so that we don't have to actually share a key that can be a different token on each API, securing each API call.
Yeah, nice. And Andrew, you mentioned the rate limiting. So you're using, I think you actually have one of our custom rate limiter inside Zuplo, right? So just for the audience, we have a number of options of rate limiting. You can do user-based rate limiting, IP-based, but there's also the ability to write a little bit of script that tells the rate limiter how you want to implement it. People will often, a free customer gets 10 requests per minute, a premium customer gets 1,000, etc. You folks have a custom rate limiter on Zuplo, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that and how hard it was to get working?
Yeah, so as I sort of said earlier, it literally took minutes to get a prototype working. We actually have 3 levels of rate limiters. So we have as you say, a custom rate limiter for users who are coming in through an auth flow, where we can identify their the organization that they work for. We also then have a sort of a fallback for just authenticated users, and then we have another fallback for IP-based rate limiting. So even our anonymous methods are all being rate limited now.
Awesome. Another thing I know you folks did, and actually you've shared this with me. Obviously, it's full of sensitive data, so we can't share it on screen here. But you are a Datadog house. You use Datadog for your observability and instrumentation and so on. And so you're using our Datadog integration and built out a really cool dashboard. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Sure. So we knew we wanted, obviously, at a high level, to be able to look at all of our APIs in one place. We wanted a holistic view of our estate, and we didn't at that time have that. So if we wanted to look at how many calls were coming into different parts of the system, we would have to go into individual services and go and actually, query those individually. By sort of introducing Zuplo and adding in the observability there, we were then able to create views that showed us all requests across all APIs in one view, which was really powerful, really important. It allows us to sort of very quickly pinpoint errors and spot errors as they're happening. It also allows us to sort of get some insights into some of the API design decisions that have been made over the years. So we're sort of starting to see patterns that we maybe wouldn't have spotted before, and also inconsistency. So it helps us to sort of go back and revisit areas of the API that maybe are not as consistent as we'd like. It was, some of this was driven by our sort of desire to get rate limiting in. So we knew we wanted to have views that would allow us to see, requests by customer, by user, and various other different kind of cuts. And then other things have just emerged over time. So as we've used it, we realized we could sort of start to see, request durations actually start to calculate the elapsed time of a request, and that again is really valuable information. It shows us which areas of the system are perhaps slower than we'd like compared to other areas as well. So it just gives us lots of areas to focus on.
Yeah, we've also really embraced open telemetry as a standard. And with the Datadog platform and being able to work and customize and Zuplo quite nice, we've been able to establish end-to-end tracing throughout the system. So we can open up an API call and then drill right down to all the individual components and stages that a call goes through, which is an absolutely invaluable monitoring and troubleshooting tool.
Yeah, it's awesome. And kudos to the dashboard you folks have built in Datadog is, actually it's product inspiration for us. Is like, we should just have this built into the product. So great job on that. I think that the sort of last sort of technical thing it might be worth talking about, we've touched on quite a few things here, but is the sort of developer workflow you experienced end to end. Andrew, I remember you mentioning some positive feedback. I think it might have been on your product hunt comment or something when we launched free. But you talked about sort of the try test feedback loop and, the fact you found the product enjoyable. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience? I mean, you were the person who spent the most time in Zuplo, I think, at Imburse. So, what did the whole thing feel like end to end, and what were your favorite little parts of the experience?
Yeah, it's really refreshing, really fresh UI. The ability to write those policies, that TypeScript in a web editor. I was quite apprehensive when I first heard that that's how it's done, but actually when I got to use it, it was really, really powerful, I thought, and having that sort of inline help really, really worked well. We do, as I said earlier, sort of follow a GitOps model. So we do sort of write our code, in source control. However, having the ability to use your working copy and be able to just pull down the latest version from our master branch, and be able to then just prototype changes and actually be able to sort of with a few kind of clicks be able to have a working sort of branch build, if you like, of that change or proposed change. It literally takes seconds, and then we can just sort of hook up our API client and actually test that API and see how it looks and how it works. So yeah, it's been a really really useful. Be a shame to not have that.
We have all of our APIs specified as Open API. All of our configuration across the entire platform is in configuration files. So and they are accepted by our pipeline. And that was, again, we said this at the beginning, really important for us to be able to have an automated, repeatable configuration.
Yep.
And it's absolutely vital that whatever platform we chose had to support that. And it was certainly, of everything we looked at, Zuplo was by far the easiest way to achieve that solution.
That's great to hear. So I think, we're coming up on 20 minutes there. Let's wrap this up. So James, help me. We talked about the challenges. We've gone through some of the technical details. How would you sort of summarize the outcome now you're live on Zuplo? Like, how has it change things for Imburse? How do you feel like you stand on your on the original challenges you set out to solve?
So I think it's really delivered. The whole experience of an API-based product, it's absolutely vital that our customers understand how our product works. They have a clear understanding of the APIs, that what our documentation says those APIs do and how they work is actually how they work. So the fact we're able to tie our documentation, our specifications, and how we do deployment all together means that we can really nail that consistency. And we're getting great performance. I've never had a sort of performance complaint really from customers. We have great observability. It fits with our platform.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. Very much appreciate it. And I'm off to go and read about Clojure now. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.